Hi, boys and girls. We're going to finish chapter 2, Ramona and the $1 million, from Ramona and her father right now. And if you remember, last time we read, she had made a crown from these little balls that she found on the ground that had prickles on them, and she stuck it in her hair, and now it's stuck. So how are they going to get it out? Did you come up with any ideas? All right, let's see if what they do matches what you came up with. So her father said, I'm going to back up a little bit. As Mr. Quimby unlocked the front door, he said, we'll have to see what we can do about getting you uncrowned before your mother gets home. Any ideas? Ramona had no answer, although she was eager to part with the crown before her father guessed what she had been doing. In the kitchen, Mr. Quimby picked off the top of the crown, the part that did not touch Ramona's hair. That was easy. Now came the hard part. Yow, said Ramona when her father tried to lift the crown. That won't work, said her father. Let's try one burr at a time. He went to work on one burr, carefully trying to untangle it from Ramona's hair, one strand at a time. To Ramona, who did not like to stand still, this process took forever. Each burr was snarled in 100 hairs, and each hair had to be pulled before the burr was loosened. After a very long time, Mr. Quimby handed a hair-entangled burr to Ramona. Yow, yike, leave me some hair, said Ramona, picturing a bald circle around her head. I'm trying, said Mr. Quimby, and began on the next burr. Ramona sighed. Standing still, doing nothing was tiresome. After what seemed like a long time, Beezus came home from school. She took one look at Ramona and began to laugh. I don't suppose you ever did anything dumb, said Ramona, short of patience and anxious lest her sister guess why she was wearing the remains of a crown. What about the time you... No argument, said Mr. Quimby. We have a problem to solve, and it might be a good idea if we solve it before your mother comes home from work. Much to Ramona's annoyance, her sister sat down to watch. How about soaking, suggested Beezus. It might soften all those millions of little hooks. Yow, yipe, said Ramona. You're pulling too hard. Mr. Quimby laid another hair-filled burr on the table. Maybe we should try. This isn't working. It's about time she washed her hair anyway, said Beezus, a remark Ramona felt was entirely unnecessary. Nobody could shampoo hair full of burrs. Ramona knelt on the chair with her head in a sink full of warm water for what seemed like hours until her knees ached and she had a crick in her neck. Now, Daddy, she asked, at least once a minute. Not yet, Mr. Quimby answered, feeling a burr. Nope, he said at last, this isn't going to work. Ramona lifted her dripping head from the sink. When her father tried to dry her hair, the burr hooks clung to the towel. He jerked the towel loose and draped it around Ramona's shoulders. Well, live and learn, said Mr. Quimby. Beezus, scrub some potatoes and throw them in the oven. We can't have your mother come home and find we haven't started supper. Supper is the evening meal, by the way. A lot of us call it dinner. They call it supper. When Mrs. Quimby arrived, she took one look at her father, trying to untangle Ramona's wet hair from the burrs, groaned, sank limply into a kitchen chair, and began to laugh. By now, Ramona was tired, cross, and hungry. I don't see anything funny, she said sullenly. Poor Ramona, look at the hair. Ugh. Mrs. Quimby managed to stop laughing. What on earth got into you, she asked. Ramona considered, was this a question grown-ups asked just to be asking a question, or did her mother expect an answer? Nothing was a safe reply. She would never tell her family how she happened to be wearing a crown of burrs. Never, not ever, even if they threw her in a dungeon. Beezus, bring me the scissors, said Mrs. Quimby. Ramona clapped her hands over the burrs. No, she shrieked and stamped her foot. I won't let you cut off my hair. I won't. Beezus handed her mother the scissors and gave her sister some advice. Stop yelling. If you go to bed with burrs in your hair, you'll really get messed up. Ramona had to face the wisdom of Beezus's words. She stopped yelling and considered the problem once more. All right, she said, as if she were granting a favor, but I want Daddy to do it. Her father would work with care, while her mother, always in a hurry, since she was working full time, would go snip, 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 and be done with it. Besides, Supper would be prepared faster and would taste better if her mother did the cooking. I am honored, said Mr. Quimby, deeply honored. Mrs. Quimby did not seem sorry to hand over the scissors. Why don't you go someplace else to work while Beezus and I get supper on the table? Mr. Quimby led Ramona into the living room where he turned on the television set. This may take a while, he explained. As he went to work, we might as well watch the news. Ramona was still anxious. Dad, don't cut any more than you have to, Daddy, she begged, praying the margarine boy would not appear on the screen. I don't want to go to school. I don't want everyone at school to make fun of me. The newscaster was talking about strikes and a lot of things Ramona did not understand. The merest smidgen, promised her father. Snip, snip, snip. He lay a hair and snarled burr in the ashtray. Snip, snip, snip. He laid another burr beside the first. Does it look awful? Asked Ramona. As my grandmother would say, it will never be noticed from a trotting horse. Ramona let out a long, shuddering sigh, the closest thing to crying without really crying. Snip, snip, snip. Ramona touched the side of her head. She still had hair there, more hair than she expected. She felt a little better. The newscaster disappeared from the television screen, and there was that boy again singing, forget your pots, forget your pans. It's not too late to change your plans. Ramona thought longingly of the days before her father lost his job, when they could forget their pots and pans and change their plans. She watched the boy open his mouth wide and sink his teeth into that fat hamburger with lettuce, tomato, and cheese hanging out of the bun. She swallowed and said, I bet that boy has a lot of fun with his $1 million. She felt so sad. The Quimbys really needed $1 million. Even $1 would help. Snip, snip, snip. Oh, I don't know, said Mr. Quimby. Money is handy, but it isn't everything. I wish I could earn $1 million like that boy, said Ramona. This was the closest she would ever get to telling how she happened to get a crown of burrs on her head. You know something, said Mr. Quimby. I don't care how much that kid or any other kid earns. I wouldn't trade you for $1 million. Really, Daddy? This remark about any other kid? Ramona wondered if her father had guessed her reason for the crown, but she would never ask, never. Really? Do you mean it? Really? Mr. Quimby continued his careful snipping. I'll bet that boy's father wishes he had a little girl who finger painted and wiped her hands on the cat when she was little, and who once cut her own hair so she could be bald like her uncle, and who then grew up to be 7 years old and crown herself with burrs. Not every father is lucky enough to have a daughter like that. Ramona giggled. Daddy, you're being silly. She was happier than she had been in a long time. Okay, boys and girls, our next chapter is called The Night of the Jack-o'-lantern. So when do you think this story takes place? Think about what you think the setting might be, where and when this story might take place. Try to think about what might happen too, but remember, it's realistic fiction, so make sure your predictions are realistic. I'll see you next time, boys and girls. Bye-bye.